The Extra on KRDO News Radio, the show that connects you with the topics and issues and people that are important to you. And today, we welcome for our monthly check-in, Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group. Good morning.
Good morning. So good to be here.
Scoot up there a little bit for me. I know you're still jet-lagged. You just got back from an incredible trip.
I did. Just got back from Italy.
Nice. Couple weeks in Italy, that'll do the soul good, won't it?
Yeah,
Not that I've
kidding.
ever been, I'm just imagining.
Yes, well, you need to find out for yourself.
I know.
Renee.
I know. One of these days. And of course, when Catherine is here, we always talk about all things estate planning and being ready. And it's not just estate planning, but that's part of it. And basically, I like to put it like this, helping your family after you're gone. Is that good?
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it's about.
That's exactly what it's about. It's not like, oh my gosh, and I understand it's fearful. It's a fearful thing for some people to plan their end of life stuff, but you're helping your family in the end. And today we're going to talk about some of the biggest misconceptions about estate planning. There's a lot, aren't there?
There are tons. Yes, we don't have enough time to go through all of them, but we'll hit the highlights.
Okay. So let's start with the first one, Catherine. Only need estate planning if I'm wealthy. I mean, I don't have anything. Who's going to want my stuff? Why do I need to plan my estate?
Exactly. A lot of people say that. You know, I don't have millions of dollars and I don't have a business. I don't have a lot of fancy stuff. And so I don't think that I really need an estate plan. And I think there are two misconceptions built into that. First of all, what is an estate plan?
Right.
And second of all, how many assets do you need to have in order to have something in writing? So an estate plan is just any kind of written documents, including a will. Everybody kind of knows they're supposed to have a will, right?
Yeah.
So a will and medical directives and power of attorney. There are some really basic documents that are in the world of what we call estate planning that every single person
should have,
regardless of what you own, ought to have.
Now, let's go into, and I know we've touched on this before, but let's go into let's pick on one of those documents from the estate plan.
Okay.
You don't have a will. What happens when you pass if you don't have a will?
Yeah.
Multiple things, I'm sure.
When you pass away, what happens in general depends on what you own when you die. And how you own it. So
Right.
there are a lot of different variables that go into what happens when we die. So without a will, things will go either according to the beneficiary designation that you have, like for life insurance.
Okay.
You probably have a beneficiary if you have life insurance. You might have a beneficiary on your bank accounts.
Right.
Those kinds of things. Anything where a retirement plan, people would typically have a beneficiary. So those things go without having to go through the probate process to the beneficiary.
Okay.
Now, you may or may not want that. We can come back to that in
Right.
a little bit. It means that you don't have any protections from a lot of the issues that people are worried about these
Right.
days. But things at least will go to the right people, even if it's not in the right way.
Okay.
Then, for things that don't have a beneficiary designation, it depends on how you own it. If you own something in joint tenancy, for example, your house, most married couples, for example, own their house in joint tenancy. If I own it in joint tenancy with my husband, let's say,
Right.
then when I die, it automatically goes to my husband. It doesn't have to go through the probate process.
Right.
If I'm single and I die and I own it myself, then
does it
it's
go
going
to?
to go to whomever the state has decided my stuff ought to go to without a written plan in place.
Wow.
So the state has a whole default plan that would be to my children if I have children. If I don't have children, then it goes to my parents. If I
you
don't have surviving
parents,
parents, then it goes to my siblings, and then it keeps going on out from there.
Wow.
And if I own real estate, or if I have more than a certain dollar amount of property, it's $71,000 now, that has to go through probate
Yeah.
in order to get to the recipients.
That's a lot. Just because you didn't have part of your, estate planning together, right?
Right.
Another big misconception with estate planning. I am not old. I don't need an estate plan. I'm not old enough.
Right.
Is that another big misconception?
It's a huge misconception. And this one, I have to breathe deeply this morning because I was reminded again this last week. I have a colleague in another part of the country who lost 2 of her immediate family members in an accident. And they're a young family. Stuff happens. All the time, stuff happens.
Yeah.
And it can be a sudden tragic illness, like my friend who was diagnosed at age 44 with leukemia and given 6 to 7 weeks to live. It could be an accident. And it is either something that might kill us, or maybe we're just going to be injured and disabled, and then that creates its own set of problems.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. So no age is, at least of adult age, right?
Yeah.
18 and up.
Exactly.
Probably a good age.
Once you're age 18, there are absolutely some basic documents that everybody ought to have.
Okay. And another misconception, and this is just separate from estate planning in general, trusts are just for rich people. And maybe, and we always hear that word like a trust baby or something. And I think that's a different kind of thing, isn't it, than from what you're referring to here?
Right. I think trusts originally were created for people who were wealthy.
Yeah.
Substantial wealth.
Right.
And trusts have evolved. There are a lot of different kinds of trusts. Some of them are for more sophisticated issues like tax planning or charitable giving or Medicaid qualification, things like that. But the most common type of trust these days is what's called a revocable living trust, or living trust, a lot of people call it. And it's just kind of for the everyday person who owns everyday kinds of stuff.
Like your TV, your couch, your house, your just anything.
Exactly.
Just everyday stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the person who has just enough money in the bank account to pay this month's bills.
Right.
Yeah. That's the kind of person who first falls into the category of benefiting from a living trust, because there are so many things that it changes for them and for their family.
And when we come back from break with Catherine, we are going to talk. We touched on probate just a little bit, but I think more people end up in probate, right, than they would like to.
Yeah.
Because a plan was not in place.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
So we'll talk about that with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group, when we come back on the Extra KRDO News Radio. Welcome back to the Extra on KRDO News Radio. We're talking with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group. Always love when you're on, Catherine. So much great information. And the truth of the matter is, it's something we all ignore, isn't it? Being prepared for end of life.
Yeah,
or for emergencies.
Pretend like the end of our lives will not come, or at least it won't come soon.
Right. Or like, it's not going to die. Doesn't happen to me.
That's for really old people.
Exactly. And that's just not the case, as you and I were discussing. Emergencies happen, things happen.
Right.
And we were touching before the break as the misconceptions that go with estate planning. And we also touched on the different things that can go into an estate plan. We're talking about wills, everything like that. End of life instructions, anything like that. But one thing that people may not realize is probate. And we kind of touched on that. And I think a lot more people end up in probate than they would like to, right? And why do they go through that?
One of the biggest reasons that I see so many people accidentally go through probate is that they don't realize that even if you have a will,
right,
you're still going to have to go through probate if you own real estate or a little bit of property that doesn't have a beneficiary designation on it, like bank accounts, car, furniture, that kind of thing. You can still have to go through probate, even if you don't own real estate. But everybody who owns real estate
will go through probate. Even if, like you were saying before, my significant other passes.
Mm-hmm.
we mutually owned a house. We, equally owned a house, a property.
Right.
We still have to go through probate.
Yes, because when you pass away, it goes to your joint owner, your significant other, and then when they pass away, there's probate.
Right.
Waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a great thing for us lawyers.
Well, and you and I were talking, like, you can end up years in court. Years
Right.
and years in court.
The average length of probate in Colorado, last published statistics that I saw from the Bar Association, was 9 to 24 months on average in Colorado. And that's pretty true to what I hear from people. Sometimes people are able to get through a little bit quicker, maybe 6 months-ish. That's not the norm.
I would say, yeah, probably not.
Right. Normally around a year, probably. And then there are probates that go on for years and years.
Right.
And years.
And it does become a big hassle, doesn't it?
It's a huge hassle. And it's not like there's a ton that has to happen in probate. There's some paperwork, there's some built-in waiting, there are some processes that we have to go through. It's not an overwhelmingly burdensome process, but you've got lawyers involved.
Yes.
You've got a judge involved.
Yes.
You've probably got other family members involved. You have a lot of feelings involved. All of the feelings in the family that were buried beneath the surface tend to come out.
Yes.
Especially around the money. And so you've got this thing hanging out there for a year or two or more that feels contentious.
Right.
And then there's the money side of it. The average cost, again, last published statistic that I saw, 3 to 4% of the gross value of your estate goes toward probate costs. So that's, if I have $1 million worth of stuff, let's say $400,000 house, it's a nice house, and a $375,000 mortgage, it's still going to be 3 to 4% of that $1 million gross, because all the same stuff has to go through probate.
Right.
And it's some of that goes to the attorney, and I'd say the majority of the probate costs are what you pay to the attorney typically.
And I was going to say, and I don't think that's something else that people think about, it can be costly.
Right.
It can be costly.
Right. Tens of thousands of dollars. So $30,000 to $40,000 would be the average on a $1 million gross value estate. Most of them that we see are more in the maybe $10,000 to $20,000 range, and that's attorney's fees, the court fees, the publication and bond fees, personal representative, and all the other little things that come up. But the biggest part of that is the lawyer. And I've had lots and lots of people over the years come in and tell me stories about how when their parents died, the lawyer got either most of the estate or all of the estate.
Right.
It's a pretty frequent happening.
Because of the expenses associated with everything that went on.
Right.
So what was there was then gone.
Exactly.
Wow. Isn't that, and that's got to be very hard for them to, I think, even imagine. You know what I mean?
Right.
Dealing with all of this, and then all of that estate goes to the attorney.
Yeah.
To help.
And so that's one of the big reasons why we do so many public workshops, because people, when they realize that probate happens to most people, to every single homeowner, unless you have some other plan set up, most people want to avoid probate. They don't want their family to go through that hassle, or have the delay. Even if your kids, let's say, are getting the money when you're gone, and they are not desperate for cash, waiting a year or two with this thing hanging out there gets in the way of their grief process.
It does. Yeah. Absolutely.
And you know from personal experience, it's stuck there, and we feel like we can't fully move forward emotionally until this stuff is closed out.
Absolutely. And it always just kind of lingers there. I mean, when you are in court for years, like you said, it's like, okay, still, like you said, still dealing with this. And it can cause such problems within the family sometimes too.
Right.
You know, so again, a good point for having an estate plan together, so that you don't have to worry about this, and neither does your family.
Right. And maybe, I mean, partly for the financial side of things, but mostly just for the emotional well-being of your family.
Yes, absolutely. And I'd say I'd throw mental
yes,
your
exactly.
family in there too. Yeah. Okay, now when we come back, we are going to talk about living trusts. And I like this point that you make, Catherine. Why probate lawyers hope you'll never know about them. So we'll talk with Catherine when we come back on The Extra on KRDO News Radio. Welcome back to The Extra on KRDO News Radio. It's our monthly check-in with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group. And before we went to break, and we've been touching kind of, Catherine, about the umbrella of estate planning, why it is so important. Probate. Oh, probate, right? But most people will end up going to probate.
Right.
But you can make it easier if your estate plan is in order, right? Potentially.
Exactly.
But then living trusts come in, and we did talk about that. We talked about why a lot of people don't estate plan. I'm not wealthy enough. I'm not old enough. I don't need a trust. I don't have hordes of money.
Right.
But that's just not true. And that's where the living trust comes in.
Right.
And let's go over really quick again how the living trust can protect you and your family.
Right. So the living trust holds everything that you own during your lifetime. So your house, your bank accounts, your life insurance, your car, your furniture, all of that. Instead of owning it in your name as an individual, you own it in your name as trustee of your trust. So the trust is just an empty theoretical box sitting there holding your stuff for you.
All your stuff. And you were saying earlier, it's everything.
Everything except for your retirement plans.
Okay, your retirement.
That's the only thing that doesn't go in there is your retirement plan. Okay. So it's all sitting in there. You're the trustee of your trust, so you're still in control. It's like you have the key to your own little treasure chest. Now, if you become incapacitated, if you, God forbid, have a stroke or a brain injury or dementia, instead of us having to take you down to court and have you publicly declared incompetent and setting up conservatorship and guardianship, which is expensive and really, really intrusive for the rest of your life, instead of having to go through that, if you have a living trust set up, if you're married and you have a co-trustee, your spouse can still take care of everything while you're incapacitated without having to get the court involved. Most people don't realize if I'm incapacitated and I'm married, my husband can't sell the house without my signature. My husband can't sell the business without my signature. And so we have to get the court involved. They just assume spouse will be able to take care of things. So with the trust, we keep the court out of things when we become incapacitated. And then when we die, our successor trustee steps in and manages everything on our behalf without having to get the probate's court authorization to be able to do that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it kind of bypasses that.
It bypasses us lawyers.
Thing.
Yes.
Well, and that was going to be the thing is because I noticed you made a note about why probate lawyers probably don't like living trusts.
Right. And I've heard from a number of people that they met with a probate attorney who said, you don't need to worry about avoiding probate. It's not a big deal. And I would agree.
They go into for years?
Right.
Okay.
I would agree probate in Colorado is not a horrible monster. But what I think people should at least find out for themselves what probate is and make the decision for themselves rather than listening to what one of us lawyers says about whether probate is horrible or not. The facts are it takes some time, it costs some money, and it feels like a hassle to most people.
Probate does.
Exactly.
But you can avoid, again, like you're talking about with a living trust, you can avoid a lot of those fees a lot of the time, it sounds like, with that living trust.
Exactly. And there's still, of course, some practical stuff that has to be wrapped up. There are still some fees and potentially still some legal fees, but you've eliminated all of the probate costs in addition to the other things that it takes
just
when
by
somebody
having
passes
that
away.
living trust there.
Exactly. And doing it right.
Right.
A lot of people have living trusts, but they don't have all of their stuff in it. Their lawyer never helped them transfer their real estate or their bank accounts or their investments or their personal property into the trust. And so it's just an empty box and they think they're okay, but it doesn't have their stuff in it and it does them no good when they die.
And really quick, I just want to touch on it. Again, you said in the living trust, your retirement stuff cannot be in the living trust,
exactly.
Right? Okay.
Don't want that to go in there because it messes up the taxes.
Right. And you said, and I want to touch on the fees too, because you have a note here, substantially fewer fees at death. And that's, again, going back to all the probate fees, court fees.
Exactly.
All of that
Publication
stuff.
and bond fees, etc.
Okay. And here's something, and we're going to have to carry this over to the last break, and then we'll talk about your upcoming workshops. You always have workshops that are open to the public.
We do.
For people to come in, and we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about your book and all that fun stuff. And this is not uncommon now. It is so common, but blended families need to have special considerations because that can put a whole nother layer onto everything, right?
Right.
So, and this is not uncommon though anymore, is it?
Not at all.
Okay. So what are some of the special considerations that a blended family, when they're doing their estate planning, should keep in mind?
So one of the considerations is who gets the house. Do you want your spouse to be able to stay in the house, or do you want the house to go to your own kids?
And I wonder if sometimes it just because of dynamics and situations, if sometimes it's just not sell the house. Do you know what I mean? If there's somebody's trying to contest the whole thing, that's just my thought bubble. But
right.
Yeah, so you need to consider that, right?
Yeah. And really the overarching principle and concern with blended families is how do I take care of my spouse and take care of my children?
Right.
And so there are several different factors inside of that you want to make sure you walk through with an attorney to make sure that you have covered so that you're not leaving anybody out.
And that's just it, because your spouse clearly is not the children's parent. If we're saying that in this situation.
Exactly.
So do you leave everything to the spouse? Do you disinherit the kids? Is that you're kind of treading on?
Yes. So those are the questions to be asking. What is it when you pass away, if you pass away before your spouse, what do you want to leave to your spouse? And what would you like to leave for your children?
Yeah.
And then setting it up in a way that where you actually do that. Some people will just leave everything to surviving spouse and say, oh, I know that they'll take care of my children when they die. Well, 99% of the time, they end up not actually doing that. And often it's not malicious. Either they get convinced by their own biological kids after you die that everything should go to them, or things get transferred to biological kids while your spouse is still living, or you just accidentally do it by putting everything in joint tenancy. If I have kids and I come into a new marriage and put everything into joint tenancy with my new spouse, our bank accounts are joint, our house is owned in joint tenancy, and I die, my will might say give 50% of everything or 100% of everything to my children. But if it's all in joint tenancy with my new spouse, my kids accidentally get disinherited.
Really?
That happens all the time.
Really?
All the time.
So you have to be very careful, like you said, if you are blending families, to make sure if you want your kids to get a certain amount and your spouse to get a certain amount, that is written very clearly out.
Exactly.
Okay.
And life insurance is a great bridge. If you want to have more available for your surviving spouse or want to have more available for your kids, you feel like you can't take care of everybody's needs, get some life insurance. It costs a little bit of money, but if it allows you to take care of everybody and make them feel taken care of, spend the money.
And when we come back with Catherine, we're going to keep talking about the last couple of points about, and I like this point, like don't let your spouse get kicked out of the house. We're going to touch on that really quick when we come back. And then we'll go into coming up to your upcoming workshops, book, and all that stuff, okay? We're talking with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group, next on The Extra on KRDO News Radio. Welcome back to The Extra on KRDO News Radio. We're talking with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group. And Catherine, before we went to break, we were talking about blended families and the special considerations that you have to take into consideration when putting your estate plan together. And joint tenancy creates major problems for some families, right?
Right. It makes everything go to your new spouse and nothing go to your kids.
Yeah. And if you don't want that, but you may not know that going in when you're planning your estate. Right.
And a lot of people don't realize, they think of blended families as maybe younger families. But there are older blended families too. And it happens all the time. Somebody is widowed and gets remarried to another widow or widower,
Right.
They get married in their 70s or 80s.
Absolutely. Right.
And they accidentally disinherit their own kids. And so one of the big things that you want to make sure of is related to the house.
Yeah, because I was talking about this, and it's like, okay, so my spouse passes. It's my spouse. It's not my kid's parent.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, I'm out of the house, right? Does that happen a lot?
It happens a lot, and sometimes they don't end up getting kicked out, but it ends up going to court. And that in itself, when you've just lost your spouse, to have somebody take you to court and have to hire a lawyer and deal with that kind of stress can feel really, really, really awful.
Yeah,
and
like I'm about ready to lose my house because...
Right.
Yeah.
Set up a plan so that your spouse, even if you want, let's say that you want your house to go to your own biological children. Let's say that you bought the house 50 years ago with your first spouse. And the children always loved this house, and now you're 80, you got remarried. You want your new spouse to be able to live there for a short period of time after you die, but you want your house to go to your kids. Set it up in your estate plan so that it's a preset amount of time that your new spouse has the right to continue living there, and all of the terms around which the bills are going to be paid, the maintenance, upkeep are going to happen. So maybe let your new spouse stay there for a year.
Yeah.
And say, this is how the bills are going to get paid. This is who's going to pay for maintenance and upkeep. And then after that, it needs to be sold and the proceeds will go to my kids, or whatever your plan is.
So basically, the more specific you are, the better.
To a certain point.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You don't want to get too specific, because then if you lock it into something, like some people will say, when I die, it has to be put on the market within 30 days.
Right.
That might sound great in today's market, but let's say that the real estate market has just tanked. There's some big event in the world, and we don't want to have to sell it while the market is down temporarily.
Right.
Having it locked in your estate plan at 30 days means we're going to lose money on the sale of your house.
Right. That makes sense.
So work with your lawyer to make it flexible.
Now, we could keep talking, Catherine, you and I, we could just jibber forever. But you do have workshops coming up, which are fantastic because they are open to anybody to come to the workshops.
Absolutely,
So
and they're free.
Yes. And when are your workshops coming up?
We just had workshops last week, but we have some coming up again on Tuesday, August 8th.
Okay.
At both 2 o'clock and in the afternoon and 6:30 in the evening. And then again on Saturday, August 12th. At 10 o'clock in the morning. And those are right here in Colorado Springs, a couple different locations. If you go to our website, which is coloradoestateplan.com, you can get all the details, or call our office at 719-520-1474.
And you do have a book out which can help people get started and gives you the basic start, right, to think about estate planning. All kinds of
basic information. And we give out copies of that for free at our workshops. So if you'd like a copy, come on by.
And what's the title of the book?
It's Planning Your Legacy.
Perfect.
Is the title.
Okay, got it. Perfect. And now you're going to be back in August, of course, and we're going to focus on caregivers in August. You have a commercial coming out, is that right? Or you had to shoot a video?
So I have just completed all of the content for a video course for people with a loved one with Alzheimer's or other form of dementia. So this is for if your spouse has dementia, or your parent has dementia, or your neighbor has dementia, helping people plan through the legal, financial, medical, emotional, housing, care, all of those issues, helping you create a plan for all of those things.
And that's what we're going to talk about next time with Catherine on The Extra, and that'll be in August, is basically if you're a caregiver, you want to make sure you tune in, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Catherine. Hammond Law Group. We will chat with you next month. Coming up tomorrow on The Extra, it's the physicians from ER Specialist Urgency Center. You know, I know it's hard to believe. It's time to get the kids back to school, and we're going to tell you everything you need to know to get them ready on The Extra on KRDO News Radio.